What's up, everybody? Welcome into a very special edition of the 24/7 Sports College Basketball Show. I'm Adam Finkelstein. I'm here with Isaac Trotter, and as you can probably tell, we are in Chicago at the home of the NBA Draft Combine. Now, obviously, the story here has been about the Dallas Mavericks having a 2% chance of getting the number one pick in last night's lottery and, in fact, winning. They win those Cooper Flag sweepstakes. What will San Antonio do with the number two pick? Which Rutgers teammate will they pick? Dylan Harper, Ace Bailey? Will they think about VJ Edgecombe? All that stuff is being explored. But in this show, we are going to dig into some of the storylines that will have the biggest implications on college basketball. And that is a dozen players with significant stay or go decisions. So, Trotter, let's start at the very top. The big man from Georgetown, shout out producer Kenny, Thomas Sorber. He's been limited by injury. He hasn't been able to do the entire pre-draft process, but he did go through the measurements, and that was a win for the freshman big man.
Yeah, no doubt. I think when you look at Thomas Sorber, the type of measurements that he was putting out, that wingspan just jumps off the page, the standing reach as well. I don't expect him back in college basketball next year. I think that this week could be a big win for him as long as he interviews really, really well. And it's a big blow, I think, to Georgetown, to a team that we kind of like the roster construction early, right? Like Malik Mack is there. They get Langston Love out of the portal. They're able to go get a guy like KJ Lewis out of Arizona. Like the pieces are there for an improved team, but it really kind of depends on Thomas Sorber being awesome. And I think he might be too good, and he might end up staying in the NBA draft based on how the first couple days here in Chicago have gone.
So you mentioned the measurements. You mentioned the interviews. He measured 6'9" and a quarter without shoes on. So that is a functional 6'10" with a massive 7'6" inch wingspan. That is plus 8 inches in change, absolutely off the charts. Being reported that he's interviewed with Detroit, Minnesota, Utah, and San Antonio. So you see he's got interest from teams inside the lottery. I don't personally have him going that high, but that level of interest could be enough to get him, motivate him, shall I say, to stay in this NBA draft. He is certainly one of the talking points here. Another talking point, someone that I've got mocked consistently in the top 10, but was still viewed as somewhat on the fence, and that is Carter Bryant from Arizona. A little bit counterintuitive for me to have him in the top 10 because he averaged 6 points and 4 rebounds per game. So I had an NBA scout walk past me earlier and say, please stop doing that. We love him. We need him. We need him in this draft. We want him in the draft. But Trotter, it sounds like things are headed in that direction. What are your thoughts about Carter Bryant?
Yeah, I think the early intel was that he was not going to put his name in the portal. So obviously going to head back to Arizona if he chooses the college basketball route. But he's been a riser for just about everybody. You just see the film. The jumper looks really, really clean. He made a ton of open catch and shoots this year. I think Arizona used him in a really nice way, as well as just getting him, playing him off the ball in a role that he could expect. But it's not the 3-point shooting that excites teams. It's the defense and just the way he moves, the athleticism, the length, and the defensive upside is really unmatched. So for me, he's a guy that I've liked for a long time, for a while. I think he potentially could play his way into the lottery. I would not expect him back at Arizona next year. That's just my personal opinion. We'll see how the rest of the week goes.
In a draft that is lacking a lot of 3-and-D candidates, he is one. Again, he shot 45% on open catch and shoot threes this year at Arizona. He shot the ball well earlier today here in skill work. He measured at 6'6.5" without shoes on. So it's what we expected based on high school. I'm sure they were hoping that it maybe got another half an inch in college. That was not the case. 6'11" and 3/4 wingspan. So he does have the length to compensate, but the 39.5-inch vertical leap at the time when he tested this morning, it was the highest in the field. I don't think it will finish the day as the highest in the field, but the athleticism is shining through and he shot the ball well enough. So that momentum we saw in recent weeks appears to be perpetuating. I think things are headed towards him staying in the draft. Another guy we need to talk about, Yaxel Lundeborg. Now, UAB put up huge numbers this year, especially late in the season, went into the portal, already committed to Michigan, but I'm going to tell you the truth. This setting right here at the NBA draft, he has got some serious momentum, and it sounds like he may be in this draft to stay.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about the number one player in the transfer portal. He's put up enormous numbers, but you look at the wingspan that he posted, 7'4" wingspan, I believe. The body, the frame, the numbers that he's put up, it's really, really impressive. And I think you could argue that Michigan has as much on the line as any team in college basketball this week here at the Combine, because if you get Yaxel Lindenborg back, along with an Elliot Cadeau, along with Perez Johnson, a Damar, who they've had it in the portal, Namari Burnett's coming back, Rodney Gale's coming back, you could talk yourself into Michigan being a top 15 team nationally, maybe the best team in the Big Ten outside of Purdue. But if he's good enough to stay, I think that changes the calculus with how we feel about Dusty May's second team in Ann Arbor.
And Dusty May is, in fact, here in Chicago. Makes a lot of sense because Lundeborg would be such an important piece. Lundeborg was maybe one of the biggest winners of the measurements, measured 6'8.5" without shoes on. So that is functional 6'9.5", 235 pounds, 7'4" wingspan, fourth highest differential in the field, and over a 9-foot standing reach. You add that to some of the playmaking and passing we've seen late in the season. And again, I think he's got some definite momentum heading into the first round. We'll see what decision he makes. Interesting case study here. Alex Condon from Florida is here playing at the Combine. The intel coming into this week, please let me know if you disagree with this, was that Condon was someone we were expecting to be leaning towards returning to Florida. While they won that national championship, he was not necessarily at his best late in the season. He had solid measurements, 6'11.25" without shoes on, so he's legitimate 7-footer. But interesting, he has already opted out of the 5-on-5 action. So a lot of people are wondering around here, does that mean he's got some sort of promise? Why would someone who, if they're already planning on going back to college basketball, why would they opt out of the 5-on-5? So a lot of people trying to figure out what that could mean for Alex Condon. Trotter, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, for me, I assumed that he would be heading back to Florida for it would be his junior season, right? It makes a lot more sense. But yeah, I mean, I guess it's concerning a little bit that he has chosen not to play in the 5-on-5. I don't think that necessarily means much long term. I guess if it kind of finds how the interviews go and all of that process goes. But again, like we talked about with Michigan, like Florida's another team with a ton on the line here because they have Ruben Chignello here. They have Alex Condon, right? Boogie Fland is a guy in the transfer portal that I think Florida would have a ton of interest in. They've already been linked to him early. So this is a group like Todd Golden. Yeah, like they have a chance to potentially run it back for another chance at a back-to-back national championship. But they need a big week here in Chicago with the right guys saying, and I think Condon, I think he's back. That's just my personal opinion.
I thought he was back too, and if he's back, I can't figure out why he's not playing tomorrow, unless he thinks all he's going to do is hurt himself, and that in and of itself, I don't know, that seems telling to me. Maybe someone who's helped themselves more than anyone so far in Chicago and Duke. This is bad news. Sorry to break it to you, but Cedric Coward has got some serious buzz right now. He too went into the portal, committed to the Blue Devils. But right now, he looks like he is trending toward being a potential first-round pick. So the decision-making looks like it could be flipping. Coward had terrific measurements, 6'5.25" without shoes, 213 pounds, 7'2" plus wingspan. So absolutely off the charts. An 8-inch differential, third best in the field, huge hands. Started as a D3 player, went to Eastern Washington, Washington State, and now it's either Duke or the NBA. Right now, it looks like the NBA may be the favorite.
Yeah, I mean, we were joking, like it felt like he didn't miss a shot during today. And now, granted, it's 1-0, right? There's no defenders here. You can always look good in the open floor like that. But the measurables, the ability to shoot it, the defensive upside that he has, just like I think he's also going to interview extremely well. He's a well-spoken kid who's had a really interesting path here. It's when everyone's saying it feels like I'm not saying anything new by saying like he's might be potentially playing his way into the first round, but Duke has a lot on the line here as well. Isaiah Evans, though, they did get good news with that. Isaiah Evans is going to go back to Duke for his sophomore season. So Caleb Foster, Isaiah Evans, Cam Boozer, Malik Brown, Patrick Gongba, like you start to see the semblance of that. But I think we talk about Duke as a top 5 team in the country if they're able to get Cedric Coward back. And that's going to be a bigger challenge than maybe initially expected.
Yeah, I think it is certainly trending that direction. Let's talk a few guards, beginning with a couple of freshmen. Tahad Pettiford from Auburn. We knew he was going to be undersized. He actually measured a little bit better than I expected. 6 feet, above 6 feet without shoes on, which means he's actually grown an inch since the end of high school. So I thought that was actually positive news. A lot of mocks have him going early in the second round. He's not in the portal, so it's Auburn or staying in the draft. But I will say this, Tahad Pettiford, the work is not done. He is playing 5-on-5 tomorrow and then presumably the next day as well. They can pull out at any time. He's going to be an interesting one to watch. Right now, though, I think this is trending more towards the second round. And to me, second round means you go back to college.
No question. And I think you look at Todd Pettiford, he could potentially be one of the high guards in college basketball next year. I think he could put himself in position to be one of the first team all SEC guys, right? Like you kind of look at the pecking order in Auburn has really changed. And Broom is out. Chad Baker-Mazara hits the transfer portal. They've revamped their team. Todd Pettiford is going to be the face of that team if he ends up going back to school. I'm right there with you. If it's a top 40 pick, if it's, top 45 pick that you think you could potentially have, it makes a lot more sense to head back to school. And we're talking about one of the best off the dribble shot makers in college basketball next year. Could he average 17, 18 points a game next year at Auburn? I think that's very much in play.
All right, another freshman guard who's going to be taking the court behind us in just about an hour's time is Boogie Flan. Now, remember, Flan put his name in the portal on the last day allowed before the portal closed. He said he was committed to the draft, but he's obviously keeping his options open for negotiating purposes. Like Pettiford, this is someone right now being largely viewed as a probable second-round pick. He's got a little more negotiation leverage because he is in the portal. I will say this, Trotter. He measured well, 6'2" without shoes on, which means 6'3", which I think is actually better than they listed him at during the course of the season at Arkansas. 6'6" wingspan, so not as undersized as some feared. But also, I think it's notable he's going to be one of 9 prospects who is not yet 19 years old on draft night, so he's very young. But if it's first round or going back to school, this may be one of the big dominoes left to fall in the portal.
Huge dominoes, right? We have him ranked as the number 8 player in the transfer portal. And I think that reading the tea leaves is really important here. Desmond Claude visited Florida, ended up not committing. Whether that was his decision or whether that's Florida's decision, could be very well tied with Boogie Flan's decision as well, because I think Florida would make a lot of sense for him. They have a huge opening at guard. Walter Clayton Jr. is obviously here and gone. Maybe he's in his year this week. You saw them working out together at times. Elijah Martin's also gone. Will Richards also gone. So we're looking at a full revamp for this Florida team. If Boogie Flan, I think he would want to stay in this draft. I think that's been the expectation for him in his camp, even dating back to the pre-draft stuff at Arkansas. But if he heads back to school, I think Florida's a major team to watch, and it won't be easy because he's going to command a $3 million price tag. And honestly, there's just not many teams right now that can really get in that range.
When it comes to players who can change the course of next year's college basketball season, I'm not sure that there's a bigger retention candidate out there than Milos Uzan. He made a huge jump last year at Houston, both with his shooting and on the defensive end of the floor. The most notable thing that's happened in recent days here in Chicago is that he has said he wants guaranteed money or he's going back to school. Now, what does that mean? It means first round. Sure, you get guaranteed money in the first round, but teams can also choose to give you guaranteed money in the second round or even if you go undrafted. So essentially what Uzan is saying is I'm a first round pick or I get a promise of guaranteed money or I'm going back to Houston for my senior season. Trotter, I was told coming into this week that there was actually a little more momentum for him staying in the draft. But now it sounds like we're back on the fence, and this could go either way.
Yeah, it's really going to come down to the intel and the feedback that him and his camp gets. Because, we're talking about one of the best cards in college basketball. I think if he returns to Houston, he would be in position to give JT Toppin a run for his money as the Big 12 preseason player of the year. And candidly, Houston's number 1 for me in my preseason rankings if they have Milos Uzan, Emmanuel Sharp, and JoJo Tugler back. They probably drop outside the top 10 if Uzan doesn't come back. But, terrific floater. The 3-ball is really, really improved. He shot it well today. It's going to come down to the wire here. And I really do think that if he gets a top 35 offer, that's 4 years, $32 million probably that he could theoretically garner early in the second round. That's not nothing. So even though Houston could make his worthwhile, if he gets guaranteed money, you can't really blame him for wanting to stay in this draft.
One of the questions that we have heard most consistently since arriving in Chicago, we said Cedric Howard's playing really well. What does Duke do if they don't get Coward? What does Michigan do if they don't get Lundeborg? And some of the names that are coming up are college basketball veterans who were thought to be heading towards the NBA, but maybe not necessarily getting as much traction. Darian Williams, who was a star at Texas Tech last season, he's the top guy on that list to me. Measurements were not great. 6'4.5" without shoes, 6'6" wingspan, 236 pounds. He's another one that I've been told wants to be a pro. He wants to go to the NBA, but he needs to play well in 5-on-5 in order to kind of change the narrative here because the measurements, no one expected that to be an area where he would help himself, but it was not an area he helped himself. So the question now, how much can he help himself in the 5-on-5? And if not, does he become someone that places like Duke and Michigan will circle back to if they end up having to make a big 11th hour acquisition.
Well, and teams are already starting to do that. A lot of teams have done their homework on him as well. I think he's another guy that would love to stay in the draft. But we're talking about one of the most impactful players in college basketball next year. I would bring up other teams there. I think Ohio State is well positioned for him early. They have a huge hole at the wing. I think NC State would be another one. Will Wade has a huge spot there at the wing that could make sense. Kansas could certainly still be in play, even after they made a big run at Dame Sarr, one of the top international prospects that's available. So those were the three other schools in addition to some of these big dogs. Like, he's going to have a huge market. He could be one of the highest paid players in college basketball. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. He's a walking 15-5-5 with two-way ability next year in college basketball, regardless of where he plays.
We don't need to express our love again for Darian Williams. We've already done that on the show. Let's talk about another wing, another similar position, although not really a similar type of wing. RJ Luis, St. John's, the reigning Big East Player of the Year. There's no expectation he goes back to St. John's, but I'm going to be honest, there is not a whole lot of draft buzz about him right now in Chicago. And I think coming out of the season, he actually said publicly that he's not sure his stock will ever be higher than it is right now based on the year he had. But I'm not sure I co-sign that narrative based on what we're hearing right now in Chicago. So this is going to be a very interesting one if the reigning Big East Player of the Year ends up back in the open market to play college basketball next season.
And the weird thing is you don't really hear many schools with him either.
No.
Like, it's very buttoned up in that regard. So could this be a situation where Cedric Howard doesn't go to Duke and maybe Duke circles into the RJ Luis sweepstakes? I think that could make sense. Another team I would look at is Oregon, right? If they miss out on Dame Sarr, if Dame Sarr picks Kansas, they have a huge hole at the 3 there. Maybe they go with Jackson Shelstead at the 1, Lewis at the 3, and then Nate Biddle, who's another stay or go candidate. Could he potentially come back at the 5? That could make sense. But yeah, it's weird. It feels like I've heard nothing with Luis both on the college front and very little on the NBA draft front too.
Very similar case in my mind is Jameer Watkins. We get a little more buzz about colleges that may be interested, but again, I have not heard a whole lot of buzz here in Chicago. Certainly no first round momentum to speak of at this point in time. An extreme athlete, great in transition. The shooting numbers a little misleading because he shoots a deep ball and his open catch and shoot numbers were much higher than the 32% he shot overall from behind the arc. But again, if we're talking about the valuation in the NIL market versus a potential NBA two-way deal, it just seems like the momentum is headed towards him returning to college basketball.
That makes sense. I think a team that would I have just put, playing depth chart 101, Drake Powell had an unbelievable day today, had a huge vertical over 43.5 inches. If he's gone from North Carolina, truly, North Carolina has a lot of experience playing against Jameer Watkins in the ACC over the last couple of years. That could make a lot of sense for them. They tried hard for Andrei Stojakovic, who ended up picking Illinois over Carolina. Could they potentially pivot to Jameer Watkins? That makes sense to me on paper. Obviously, that's not how college basketball always works, but you're right. I think Watkins is a guy, he's almost 24 years old now. I think he would want to start his professional career, but for a guy like that, he could make, serious money in college basketball. It's sure hard to pass that up.
Somebody's going to pay $1 million plus. You go wherever that money is, but that's just me. Otega Owe going through the draft process. It sounds like the momentum has him going back to Kentucky right now. He said as much publicly. He's not only just playing in Chicago, he's also been making some rounds and doing some private workouts. He spoke with media, says he believes he's a first-round pick, but basically insinuated that's the status he wants to get feedback that he's going to be drafted in before he stays in this draft. Frankly, I think he's going back to Kentucky, and I think he has a chance to play his way into the first round with another bump next season.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I would expect him to be back at Kentucky, and I think the bump that Mark Pope has given his guys, right? Like we saw Lamont Butler transferred in there, had his best offensive season of his life. Otega Owe, same thing, transferred into Kentucky out of Oklahoma, had the best offensive season of his career. I think he would be a major candidate for that year 2 transfer jump. That helped Walter Clayton a lot. He's almost in the same exact shoes as Walter Clayton Jr. He was in the combine 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Went into first round offer, didn't necessarily get it, went back to Florida, had a huge year in his second year with the Gators. I think Otega Owe could follow that exact same blueprint at Kentucky next season.
I want to follow this up with a look at 2 guys who played their way into this combine by initially thriving at the G League Elite Camp. Is the G League Elite Camp or G League Showcase?
Elite Camp Showcase, thank you.
All right. So basically, you have the precursor to this started over the weekend in Chicago. The best players made their way into this combine field. Mackenzie McBacco, a former 5-star recruit who has spent the last 2 years at Indiana, is now in this NBA draft combine field. Scored 41 points in 2 games in the showcase, 19 in his opener, 22 in the second game. The former Indiana player is now committed to Texas A&M, where he will play for first-year head coach Bucky McMillan. Trotter, listen, I don't think that Mackenzie should stay in this draft, but what I'm hoping this is an opportunity for him to kind of turn the page and discover his best basketball and maybe play his way back into NBA draft consideration, because that was the expectation coming out of high school.
Yeah, I mean, you talked to a few people and they were saying like this might be the best basketball that Mackenzie Mukako has played in 3 years that he played this week. So that's a really encouraging sign. I personally think that he should head to Texas A&M. I'm talking myself into that fit. I think he's going to play more of an up-tempo scheme.
Yeah.
I think he's going to play the position he's best at as a stretch four.
Exactly.
They're going to have a ton of shooting, right, with Rylan Griffin potentially being there at the 3. I like the fit with him at Texas A&M. I think Bucky McMillan's going to do a really good job there. And if he could just parlay some of the confidence that he has put together on tape this week into his junior season at Texas A&M, I think he could be a big bounce back candidate. And let's be honest, Texas A&M basketball and Indiana basketball, just the heater is just a little bit different there. I think he could settle into a really nice year for first-year coach Bucky McMillan.
One more guy who played his way into the combine from the G League showcase, Yannick Conan Niederhauser from Penn State, a 7-footer with a 37-inch vertical. This was not a name on a lot of draft boards coming into the week, but he is working his way up the ranks the old-fashioned way. And in an NBA which likes vertical spacers, shot blockers, and usually has one towering presence on all 30 NBA rosters, there is some intrigue. But at Penn State, we now hear rumors of a 7-figure NIL deal waiting for him.
Yeah, $1.5 million is the number out there. What an evaluation by Penn State and Mike Rhodes out of Northern Illinois. It's pretty remarkable what he's done. I think, though, he's a pro. Like just the stuff that he's been doing. And if you watch Big Ten basketball in any length, Yannick Conan Niederhauser was somebody that jumped off the tape at will. Just he'd spike balls into the fourth row of the deck. You throw it near the square, he's going up to throw it down too. He looks like a plug and play rotation big man at the NBA level. I would be stunned, to be honest, if he ends up back at Penn State. I really do feel like that. I felt like that for a few weeks. He ain't
making $1.5 million in the NBA next year.
He's absolutely a pro.
All right. Well, we'll see what happens. Loser buys deep dish pizza later on tonight. Those are 12. That's a dozen stay or go decisions live here from the NBA Draft Combine in Chicago. We've got lots more draft coverage, including on the CBS Sports NBA Draft Notebook, their very own NBA Draft podcast. You're going to want to find that tomorrow on the CBS Sports YouTube page as myself and Kyle Boone dive into some of the other major storylines here from the NBA Draft Combine. And as always, we will be with you here on the 24/7 Sports College Basketball Show every Tuesday. We'll see you again next week.